Classical Conversations presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools
Hello,
of
and welcome
rhetoric
back to another
seek
exciting
truth in every
episode
arena
of Refining Rhetoric. I'm your host, Robert Bortons. Today, I have a Classical Conversations graduate, business owner, and artisan. Luke Kolbie is with us. He is the CEO of Russell Moccasin Company and founder of Kingfisher Leather Works. And the Russell Moccasin Company has a storied history. 1898 it was founded, so probably about almost 100 years before you and I were born. And their mission, though, is to conserve through craftsmanship. And I'd love to touch on that today. And they believe that the best way to steward their God-given natural resources is to make products that are such high quality they don't ever need to enter the cycle of waste. I love that concept. Luke spent his high school years in classical conversations, and part of the way that they want to give back is they're looking for apprentices. And I've actually have a friend locally that apprenticed at a local leather shop and really enjoyed that. Luke, I want to welcome you to the show and hear all about your story.
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Now, Luke, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with the Russell Moccasin Company, because clearly you didn't found that.
I sure did not. So yeah, it's really a kind of a funny story, but I'm from Georgia originally, and my family and a couple other families came together, and we started a Classical Conversations chapter in Dublin, Georgia. Probably, I guess it's been more than 10 years ago, but we started in that program. My mom was one of the tutors. And so in that community, during that time, I was shooting competition trap and skeet. That was, as a homeschool person, that you don't really get to compete in a whole lot of sports at a high school level, like football or soccer or those sorts of things. And so for me, competition shotgun shooting was what I got into as a sport. And that led me to the creation of some products for myself to be able to compete better. And what I mean by that is when I was competing, all the products we used, from cartridge bags to belts and equipment, were all kind of the Bass Pro variety. And so you could really tell, looking at any one of those products, that it was not designed by anybody who had ever shot competition or really shot anything. And so that's kind of what happens when you have a product that is really separated between where it's made and then who it's made for. And so for me, as a person who's naturally creative with my hands, and I think as most homeschool people are, if you can't afford it, if you can't find it, you just figure it out and you make it. And so my first product with that was a cartridge bag to use to carry shotgun shells. It ended up becoming kind of a local hit, with people that started commissioning that product. And then we had stores that wanted us to carry it. And so I started from hand making all those different products to then buying equipment and starting to really produce those at a larger scale. And by the end of my time at CC and graduating, University of Mercer in Macon, Georgia, had offered me a scholarship for entrepreneurship to come and be a business in residence there. And I ended up taking a gap year in between high school and college to really get Kingfisher, my first business, settled. So I was traveling all over the country doing a lot of trade shows and events. At the time, my production partner was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And we did one of our first national events in Charleston, South Carolina, called Southeastern Wildlife Exposition. And it's a lot of sporting companies, sporting artisans from all around the world. And they come there, from engravers to, bronze sculptors to, shotgun manufacturers, all sorts of stuff. And at that event, I ended up being next to the family that owned Russell Moccasin. They were there as an exhibitor. And we ended up winning Booth of the Year that year. And so many of the connections that I've made in my life so far really came from that first event that we did. And so the Fabricius family had owned Russell Moccasin from 1928 all the way until me and my business partner purchased the company in 2022. And so really at that time we were just friends. So I would go up to Wisconsin to go see them and see their
Mm.
workshop and learn from them. We would share suppliers on the leather side, and really just had a friendship there. They would come down and visit us in Georgia. And through college, I continued doing Kingfisher. Ended up after graduating from Mercer, my wife and I moved to Birmingham, Alabama, and so I brought Kingfisher here. Ended up going into
Mm.
the finance field for about a year, and then going back to Kingfisher full time. And not long after I had done that is when the family that owned Russell, I found out that after COVID, it had really been a big struggle. That an aging workforce, and the
Right.
family that owned it was then the CEO that I replaced was 92 years old. And so he was at a point where, what do you do? Who do you pass it off to? His daughter, Susie Fabricius, was not. She didn't want to take care of the business by herself, and so it was just kind of in the state of, you have a 126-year-old company now that had history of making boots for 4 different U.S. presidents and one English king. Some fantastic history. We've got 3 different pairs in the Smithsonian museums in DC. And what do you do with that when you don't have another generation to pass it off to? And so a good friend of mine and now business partner and part of our coalition of businesses, Joe Julian and I, purchased the Russell Moccasin Company from the family as really a stewardship project. And the last 2 years, we've been working to get that back where it needs to be, on top of the other businesses that we have personally.
Wow. So I hear that homeschooling and classical education failed you, and you've
Really,
just had
really
a
failed me.
very, very tough. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that's very incredible. Like, talk to us a little bit, because we have, a lot of parents or different business leaders listening. How did a classical education, a liberal arts education, prepare you to run a business? Like, obviously, you kind of learned hands-on, like a lot of us do. Mother's necessity is the mother of invention, and you clearly demonstrated that. And I think that's what really gives homeschoolers an edge, the fact that we do have to create where we don't have those resources provided by others, that we have to really do it ourselves. And that makes it so that we're more creative, more able to solve life's big problems. So tell me, like, did that classical education transfer over, or did you find that hindered you somehow in running a business?
No, and it's really funny. I didn't have any problem getting into the university. I ended up getting a great scholarship, and it was a great school, and really enjoyed my time there. So even on the side of getting into a university, that was never a problem for me. I would say, in regards to classical education in general, about the way that it prepares you, or any downfalls of it, I really think the biggest part of any classical education, and certainly the part that's been the most impactful to me, is having a structure for logical reasoning and being able to find original source text of something and go back to the source and figure it out. And if you have a framework of being able to logically progress through problems, and be able to see through, kind of barriers that are built up. And I guess an example I would give of that is that most people, when I hire somebody, and if they don't have that creative reasoning of being able to logically progress through a problem, they get to a roadblock and it appears that there's no solution to the problem, and they just go, well, I can't solve this. And in reality, the person who's willing to go deeper, to research, to find the original, or to find information and become the expert on whatever that field is, even if it's a very small subject of just, I've got to solve this problem, so I've got to educate myself on this.
Right.
That is probably the biggest advantage that I would say that people who are homeschooled, or people that have that classical education have, is that they have the ability that they don't see those roadblocks. They see a problem, and then it's just, how far do I need to dig until I get to the solution? And that problem solving ability is something that I think is a huge, huge advantage for the homeschool community. Because if you're if you go to a normal high school and you meet folks from there, there's plenty of smart people. There's plenty of smart people out in the world, but the difference between smart people and being able to solve complex problems is being able to reason through it in a logical path and not be hindered by obstacles. And I think
Right.
that's something that the homeschool community does really, really well. So that was certainly a big advantage for me. I think the other things that maybe our community may be lacking in certain areas, that really, is the job of, okay, if you're going to go to a 4-year college or something like that, you may have to buckle down in certain subjects that you may or may not be lacking in a little bit. There's certain things that, you're going to excel in. I think the reading, the Latin-based side of classical conversations certainly prepares you for the literary. I find that in myself, I always had kind of a advanced like algebra lacking.
Yeah.
But that's one of those things where it really depends on what your group is and what your family is and how it's structured. And, if
Well,
you
we're
can get
solving that. We just launched a new product called the Math Map. So,
fantastic,
uh,
that's exciting. Yeah, that was the only thing
yeah,
to me. And really, again, if you have that logical framework of being able to work through something, it's not really going to hinder you that much. And so
sure.
I think having a framework that can be applied to life and business and everything in between is the thing that I appreciate most about that classical education.
Well, if you're buying businesses, you at least know how to use a calculator, I'd
Yeah,
imagine.
absolutely.
Now, I love this idea. You said your mission is conservation through craftsmanship, and we complain all the time here in America how things just break down so quickly, and that cycle of change and that consumerism mindset. So, talk to me a little bit about like what does that mean to conserve through craftsmanship?
So this really all started when I first got into Mercer after I had taken my gap year. And I immediately was a business in residence. So I had an office on campus right next to the business school. I had interns that were seniors when I was a freshman working underneath me. It was a very, very strange situation. It was a great learning experience. But the thing that I found very quickly was, okay, here I am, about to transition from high school and that side of things. I've got this business. I want this to be my career. And the problem that I faced was it's like, okay, when you're, a teenager and you're starting a business, a lot of people want to support you because you're young. And that's not wrong. It's a great thing to support young folks that have an entrepreneurial spirit. But where it becomes a problem is where that becomes the talking point, where it's like, okay, you should support him because he's young, not because
Yeah.
he creates an excellent product or because he's trying to solve these problems. And so when I wanted
And
to
every day
be
you get
about,
older, so that's
no, exactly. Yeah, eventually
less and less
that's not
compelling.
going to work. That's not going to be a solid foundation for a business structure. And so as I began it's like, how do I take the focus off of age? How do I take the focus off of me and make it on the product, which is where I wanted it to be? How do I tell people why I do what I do? And a lot of it came back to me, and this will be a little bit of a tangent, but certainly related. As a craftsman, as a sportsman, as a believer, to me, the biggest things that align in my life are the fact that I know that I was created and designed for a purpose and a reason that, there's no way that I can explain the complexity of life. But one of the things that I think is even more difficult to explain is the fact that even among life, humans are the only ones who have the ability to create. You don't see creativity in any other life form. You don't see you don't see lions over there trying to build them a hut.
Yeah.
All other life forms, apart from humans, do not have creativity. And if you look at all of human nature, all of human experience, there's never been a single generation of humans to exist that have not had the will and the drive to create. And that's a
Mm.
direct reflection of the fact that we were created in God's image. And obviously, God, as the creator, if he created us in his image, then certainly he designed us to have some small measure of that creativity that he himself has. And so creativity and the idea of, okay, we're stewards. In Genesis, we have two kind of two commands given us to as what our responsibility is as humans, and that's to take care of the world that he's given us and to be stewards of it. But also that we're the primary beneficiaries of natural resources. We're not supposed to not touch it and don't use it, don't enjoy it. But when we do enjoy it, we have to be stewards of it, and we have to be responsible in the way that we do that. And so some people think that that's at odds, that, we have to do one or the other. Either you steward it completely and you don't use it, or you use it and the consequences are the consequences. And if you look at the life of Jesus as a craftsman, you see that there is obviously an opportunity for some great balance there. And it's one of those things where it's not a paradox, but a little bit of a balance, as there is throughout the Bible, where it's within measure. There's a measure there that it can be done within,
Right.
where it's done right. And so Jesus is a craftsman who built homes and naturally used natural materials in the building process. They had to cut trees. They had to do all these different things in order to provide shelter and housing and to do what he did for a living in that service. I don't think most people realize that Jesus was both a craftsman and a businessman for the first 30 years of his life prior to his ministry. And so if you think about it that way, there's an incredible amount of balance to be had. And I think it's a great model for the life that we're supposed to have, is being able to work with our hands to create something that benefits people. But in that, and coming back to conservation through craftsmanship, when we make things, we have to be stewards of the resources that we're using to make them. We were given these resources in a limited, finite amount. And there are some things that are renewable, but for the most part, we have a finite amount of resources. And what I find to be very troubling is that the mass economy, which really started in the 1920s and 30s with this idea of planned obsolescence, has become so integrated into our society that we don't think anything of the mass amount of waste that we create. And I think that if you look at our incomes and what we make, so much of what we physically work to provide our families ends up in a trash can in a very short period of time. And so it's a sad thing to me, because as a sportsman, obviously that affects our natural resources, also our wildlife and the cleanliness of our water. And I think that's where it really doesn't have to be a partisan or a political issue. It's simply the fact of there's a cause and effect here that we need to be aware of, and how do we change that? And as a business person, I don't think we take in money, we do business one way, and then on the other side, we give to charitable organizations to do what we should really be doing ourselves. And so the idea of conservation through craftsmanship is really just explaining why we do what we do, which is we're creating products of such a high caliber. I guess to stop there and to kind of explain a little bit more there, a lot of people think that quality is in the materials alone, and they don't realize that a high degree of quality really exists in whether or not the product has been designed to be serviced. Because if you have a product that's not serviceable, that's not maintainable, then it has a finite lifespan, just like everything else. That's one of the things that I think is a really big problem, is that people look at a product A and product B, and this one is quality because it uses better materials. But a product that uses better materials but doesn't solve the root cause of not being able to be repaired really is just a higher degree of waste, because now you're throwing away better materials when you could have done something different. So the way that we approach business, the way that we approach stewardship and conservation as craftsmen, as sportsmen, and as believers, is simply the fact that we believe that we can be producing a product with an ideal lifespan as long as possible, that are really determined by the materials available. We can make a lawnmower that lasts 200 years, but that doesn't mean that's a really good distribution of our time and energy and efforts. But if we can make a vehicle that lasts 200 years, well, that's pretty significant. If we can make a pair of footwear that lasts 25 to 50 years, that's replacing 5, 10, 15, 20 pairs of a lesser product. So if we can do these things, it has a compounding effect with time, where the products that we're making, designing them to be serviced, utilizing the knowledge and the skill of craftsmen to create those products, that to me is the best model in order to preserve those resources. And kind of the scale that we look at is that the more resources, the more time, the more energy, the more effort that has to go into a product, the greater the need to ensure that that doesn't get wasted. So if you think about, a paper bag, there's not a whole lot of time, energy, effort, or resources put into that. But when you get onto the other side of a refrigerator or footwear or, a vehicle or anything else, it's going to use a lot of resources. And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're good stewards of those resources.
Hey everyone, this is the part where I jump in to tell you about one of our sponsors, Delightful Art Company. Discover the joy of learning with Delightful Art Co. They have arts integrated classes, beautiful art books, and enthusiastic art teachers. Transform learning into a delightful experience by combining academics and creativity for all ages. Bring beauty and creativity into your homeschooling journey with cohesive illustrated books that make subjects come alive. Encourage and inspire students from around the world in live online classes. Registration is open now for summer and fall classes. Classical Conversations families enjoy $10 off any live class with the coupon code CCFAM10OFF. That's CCFAM10OFF. Visit delightfulartco.com and make learning delightful. That's delightfulartco.com. And go get that $10 off and join a live class today. Now, back to the show. I love it. Now, part of your acquisition, you kind of solving two issues that we see in our culture that's rejected kind of this family model where they didn't have someone to pass the business on to. The next generation was disinterested or didn't feel like they wanted to get involved. And you also mentioned just that aging population of workforce. And so one of the things that we were talking about, and you're passionate about your Classical Conversations experience, is finding people who might be interested in this kind of idea and in joining your business or learning more about the leather craftsmanship. So talk to us a little bit about this apprenticeship idea that you have. Where is it located, or where is a person located? What does that involve? Is it 6 months, 3 years? Yeah, just tell us a little bit about
Sure.
This opportunity.
So, like you said, when we purchased Russell Moccasin, we have about 20 employees in Wisconsin right now, and they vary in age. I had an employee just pass away this past September that had been with the company it was his 53rd year. So he had been with the company straight out of high school for 53 years straight. And that's a pretty common thing for our employees to be there that long. But it certainly is a challenge to find people who are willing to learn something that's so technical, that's so, it takes a lot of logic on one side, just like we talked about earlier. It takes that finesse and that hand-eye coordination. But it's an art form, it really is art when you get to that high level of craftsmanship. And so one of the things that me and my business partners believe, and we have a coalition of businesses, so Conservation Through Craftsmanship, it started with Kingfisher, and then it really was an explanation for the way that we should be doing, making products. And so we've found more and more companies that have been adjacent to us that are doing the same things. And so we've created this coalition of businesses. We've got businesses in South Africa. We've got businesses in England. We've got businesses all across the United States. And it's a growing organization that's built on that certification of those principles. And so one of the things that we've all been talking about internally is, okay, these businesses need to survive past us. We're playing a long game here. I think Simon Sinek has a great, he's done some great talking on the long game and that infinite game, as he calls it. So for us, it's the same thing where, the businesses that we're running are already multi-generational. We have an uninterrupted craftsmanship heritage at Russell of 126 years of straight craftsman to craftsman to craftsman training, apprenticeship. And so for us, we want to be able to bring in that next generation. And our goal with that is for people to be able to create a really career that they can base their lives around, that doesn't really have a ceiling. Me as a craftsman, all of the guys that own these different companies, they're all craftsmen and businessmen. And so the ability to rise through those ranks as far as you want to and take over one of these businesses one day or start another business is really something that we want to foster. But it takes a lot of education because there's very few companies working at this high of a level,
Hmm.
even internationally. And so what we've been doing is trying to figure out, what does that look like? How do we do it? And I think the best answer to that is it's any and all of the above, where we want to take people that are, if you've got a daughter or son or somebody that that's coming out of high school that doesn't know what they want to do yet, but they have that inclination towards working with their hands and um, being able to create like that there's opportunities with Julian and Sons Woodworking in Heber Springs, Arkansas. They are one of the highest end woodworking companies in the world. They do gun rooms and libraries. They're working on some pretty incredible projects. He just got back from Malaysia doing a project for the Crown Prince there.
Wow.
These projects are in the highest of high halls and places. And that goes back to the Bible where it says, if you're able, and I'm paraphrasing here, the man who
Sure.
dedicates himself to his work will be shown before kings. And so that's what we're doing there is working in that way. And so for us, it's finding the people and then finding the place in the businesses where they can be there. So I think the best way to start that process, if you're interested in working in this field or even learning more about it, is to set up a time to talk with me or one of the other companies and figure out, what your bent is, where you want to go. If you just want to come up and have a short meeting and be able to come and see the working floor and meet the different people and kind of shadow for a couple of days, or if you really want to bear down and get into an internship or an apprenticeship and learn the process with the intention of making this career afterwards. One of the cool things that we've been working on is the fact that ultimately our goal is to be able to train talent within the conservation through craftsmanship community, and then be able to, if that person needs to move or wants to do something different, that once they're trained on those principles, that they then have the opportunity to go and work at these different companies all over the world. But for us, it's about, okay, if we're able to train them, one of the biggest problems that we face in the industry is we'll bring somebody in as an employee, we'll train them, and you're talking, for us at Russell, it's about a 3-month process of us training somebody to the point where they can even produce something that goes out to a customer. So you're talking about
Right.
3 months worth of training just to be able to get to the first kind of baby step of producing a sellable product. And then if somebody decides, well, I need to move, or I don't know if this is for me, ultimately, if there's somebody that has that bent and we see that that value in, it's much better for that person to be able to move to a different company and already have a bit of a resume within the industry than it is for that person to not go into any company at all. So for us, it's
Sure.
about trying to figure out different ways. Everybody's going to be different. Everybody's situations can be different. But ultimately, I think that the homeschool community is one that already is one that doesn't necessarily care about the norms of I've got to go to a 4-year college. I've got to do this like everybody else. And
Sure.
I think we're coming to a point in time, if you look at the rise of artificial intelligence, all these different things, where those clerical punch-in buttons jobs are probably not going to exist for you in 4 or 5 years. So what is going to exist? Well, it's the things that can't be done by artificial intelligence or robots or those sorts of things. And that comes back to craftsmanship.
Are these positions paid? And then it sounds like, you mentioned woodworking, you're in leather. What are the other groups or other types of work?
A company up in New Jersey called Griffin and Howe that they've been making rifles and shotguns up there since I believe 1926. And so they made rifles for Teddy Roosevelt. They made rifles for Ernest Hemingway. They're the best of the best as far as fine firearms. And so they do engraving up there. So I know that they have several different programs for people that want to be an apprentice, learn engraving, and then go into work there. So there's both paid and unpaid positions. It really depends on where you're at. If you're in high school and you want to come see if something is what you want to do, there's opportunities for that. The main paid positions are somebody that's coming in that really wants to start a very serious apprenticeship with the intention of making that their career. And those opportunities are, obviously paid and available at pretty much all the different companies in the coalition.
Great. So how do someone who's interested in this, how do they get in touch with you or the coalition? Is there like a apprenticeship website or?
Best thing is to reach out to me, and I can kind of become a little bit of a switchboard and, set up a call with the different companies if there's certain ones that somebody's interested in. We're going to be putting out our first member journal this fall, which will have a lot of those different companies in there. So there'll be a lot more information available over the coming months for people that are interested in that side of things. But for the time being, you can reach out to me directly. My email address is luke@russellmoccasin.com. And like I said, I'm happy to field those inquiries. As somebody coming from this community, I feel like I can hopefully give some insight on what it's like to do this as a career, and hopefully point somebody in the right direction.
All right. Well, we'll definitely put your email into the show notes so that people can get in touch with you. Is there any final word you want to give to our listeners, maybe related to how we need to think, our mentality towards the environment, or just how we should think about entering the workforce?
Yeah, I think I'd just speak a word of encouragement. I know for a lot of families, it's very difficult because one of the things I think that the homeschool community, classical conversations in particular, is really good at is, you can come from a position of going through this program, of becoming educated in a way that there's not really any limits, where it's like, okay, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go? Where do I want to work? And when you have so many limitless opportunities of I could do that or I could do that, it's very difficult to hone down and say, okay, what do I want to do, and where can I have a career that is meaningful and I enjoy my work. And so for parents and for students that are in that position, it's very easy to not be able to see the forest for the trees because there's that many opportunities out there. But I would say that, looking deeper into some of these different areas that really match towards that bent, looking for opportunities to match your beliefs and what you love to do with an opportunity to do that. I think a lot of people, we were talking about this the other day, where it's like, okay, do you work really hard so that you can go over here and do the things that you really love to do? Or is your work what you really love to do? And are you able to do that? And for me, that's a situation I find myself in, is that, I don't come home waiting to go do something else that's really my passion. That's what I get to do every day. And it's a happy place to be. There's always problems and stresses and those sorts of things. But when you can do what you love for work, and people say that it's never going to be work, it is going to be work. There is work all the time, even in things that you love. But looking for those opportunities and being able to find those resources, because speaking from that personal experience, there are those amazing, incredible opportunities to go from where you are in the homeschool community and find either a business or something that you're passionate about and build that out. And I think we oftentimes in the homeschool community, or myself included, will look at the rest of the world and it's like, well, I wish I found that route, or I wish I could do that. You're already on a different path, and there's so many incredible opportunities that only our community really has the mentality to access. And so don't discount the fact that we already have a different direction and a different opportunity than most people, and to find something that you really can both live out your beliefs and your passion.
That's a great word of encouragement, and I agree wholeheartedly with all of it. So, Luke, thanks so much for being on today, for your stewardship of Russell Moccasin, and that's a great history there, and just being an inspiration to see what homeschool students can do. Just a reminder that parents do a great job educating their kids, and
Absolutely.
I do agree that when you are classically educated, it's almost like you've got too many options.
Too many options.
But I think AI and different things, these fields are going to be going away, and working with your hands and being able to produce things that can be put in front of kings, that's never going to go away. And so Thank you so much for joining today's podcast. If you're interested in getting involved with an apprenticeship or learning more, be sure to send Luke an email and be on the lookout for future publications to find out what's going on in their network of businesses. So until next time, keep sharing the Refining Rhetoric podcast and keep loving Jesus. God bless.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation, and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.